you sensed the crisis the same as the horizon. So people often tend to, what you also did in your seminar, you ask, is he right or wrong, or do you agree or not? And it's so difficult because not only that he's sometimes having a contradicting perspective, but he, I think that belongs to him and his perspective on the electronic age, that these dichotomies don't work anymore. Of course, they work if you have to make a very focused Aussage.
Explanation, description.
I think he works very well on TV or video, and these metaphors of dichotomies work very well to sketch out what may be at stake, and but what is to be gained perhaps.
So last week in Berlin was a major conference called Republika, and so it used to be a blogger conference, right? So people who are interested in creating a really political internet basically are meeting there, and it's really huge now. I think 6,000-7,000 people were there last week, and the British-Polish sociologist Zygmunt Bauman came. He was a famous sociologist/philosopher. And he really explained a lot about the modern, postmodern life. Liquid modernity is one of his big terms, about our really chaotic moment in time. And it was fascinating because he talked also about privacy, about individuality, about identity in this time. And it seemed to me a lot like he's, and he never mentioned McLuhan, I don't think he ever does in his work. And he is, but it seems to be it's the same issues, right? The same basic, deep questions have not changed now these years. And so talking about the social connectedness, I think the question of connectedness is also really important for McLuhan. And how do we actually connect? How can we continue to connect and be important to each other, I think, in this, despite or because of the media. That was for Bauman also a major point, right? And you had this great line, just like McLuhan also has someone who does great sound bites. So he said something about we used to have a few friends very close by, and now on Facebook we have many friends at a distance. Right? Many strangers, we connect to strangers at a distance. So that's also something that I felt is like another aspect of the global village, right? How connected are we actually? What quality does this connection have that we establish in the media?
One thing about McLuhan's prophetic ability, he always said that he was not a prophet, that he was just observing what was going on around him, and he was kind of making drawing conclusions from the surface production of new culture that kind of hinted at the deeper transformations that were taking place. So that's kind of his method, and I think we can still use that method. And of course, pattern recognition, which McLuhan liked to refer to, has become kind of whole industry, the big data industry.
And that's because, and that's why it's allowed to be, contradictory at details, because he observes and has an open side for his observations.
He can't do anything about it, right? I mean, that's his position.
He tries to be open, yes.
Yeah, he tries to be. He doesn't like it. I mean, there are interviews with him where he's quite clearly saying that all this stuff, I want to turn off as many buttons as I can, But
it's in his last.
Yeah, and even in the first clip we had, he said we are tribalizing, and he said kind of quietly, against our will, or whether we want to or not.
Involuntarily.
Yeah, involuntarily. It's like, oh yeah. So.
But it's also interesting that in understanding media, he talks about having faith. That and of course we know in McLuhan that's quite literal. That faith has both an average and a religious meaning for McLuhan, but he has faith that we will figure this out. And Walter Ong does the same thing, or is at least considered to be somebody who had, if anything, an overly optimistic, almost Christian kind of a hope that we would work things out in this brave new media world, that we would come to an understanding and be able to control it. I'm not sure McLuhan. his gesture in understanding media notwithstanding, at the end was as optimistic. That he hoped that the laws of media would be the playbook for doing that. And it's too bad he didn't live long enough to play that out.
When we're talking about these contradictory things and bad re-tribalization backwards to the Middle Ages and so on, and losing the whole literacy, I always tend to think that he just, wants to, he wants to bewahren, will uns davor bewahren, from being numb, from being just overwhelmed by it, and perhaps say, well, it's nothing meaningful for us, so let's take part. He, at the end, his artistic concept or idea gets more and more important for him as a strategy for survival, he says.
Exactly.
And you, before in your commentary, you said that the tribe is connected to a kind of playful atmosphere, and this perhaps is connected. That this is for him the hope or the positive tendency we might.
And as Baruch was saying, he's really what he's doing is he's creating the conditions for people to be awakened and become experimenters in this world and with these concepts. He really just wants to. What does he say? He says, to not be reflective about the changes that media are imposing on us would be a disaster. And he uses the word disaster. So he's very clear about wanting to create the conditions and the energy and the motive and some sense of what we need to be experimenting with ourselves as we probe into these questions.
So this being aware and at the same time being playful and open.
And the playfulness being a good way to do that, which is why he's I think very celebratory of pop art, for example, as a way of being non-representational, not having a fixed position, but having an ironic or amusing or an almost playful way of being that, what he calls a kind of a sensory or long-distance sensory perception on what is happening to us.
If one of the greatest themes of new media, especially social media, is that there is a greater level of participation from the audience, then I'm just a bit confused about if that would still apply to McLuhan's ideas of tribalization, because I'm just thinking that creates more individualism, especially within those content creators.
You mean the specific targeting, right? Because everybody is so specifically targeted, and or do you think there's a position towards the social media that you become more individual?
I just think that because people are able to create their own content, and they're more expressing their individuality rather than just succumbing to tribalization, or as in his time, just listening to TV and not able to kind of create a backlash to it.
I think what we see, if I can respond, but I think what we see is that the content of self-publishing, of your, as I was referring to, kind of like micro-tribalities between your friend group or your readership or whatever, tends to be quite low definition, which means that sorry about that. Yes. But tends to be quite low definition. So there's a high frequency. You get a lot of information from your peer group or your associate group, but the definition of the information that you are consuming and exchanging and coalescing around is low. So that there's a kind of immediacy of a lot of information going around, and that is very satisfying, and you have individualityness, something that happens when you are expressing yourselves and often it happens I know in my friend group we speak a kind of different language. We have certain terms that we know what the meanings are, not the same meanings that other people are using, and so there's a lot of interpretation, and you have to know the in rules of those micro communities. So I think that there's still like a McLuhanist critique to be made there, that there's that this social media generates a lot of low definition, cool information that coalesces a lot of personal imagination. It's very involving, but I don't think that the fact that there's many publishers changes the paradigm. I think that that you just create many of the same paradigm overlapping.
And I'm wondering if, so in the later work, the last book he wrote, The Laws of Media, he tries to get a handle on what all media share. What are the core law-like features of all media? And he comes up with 4, and then finds out it doesn't apply just to media, but it applies to all technology. And one of the laws has to do with retrieval. And it happens when a hot medium overheats, or a cool medium gets too cool and it flips into something else. And I'm wondering if maybe I don't know, maybe social media, we're at a point with social media where it's becoming so cool that it's hotting up a little bit to some extent. It's becoming explosive and fragmentary in the ways that McLuhan attributes to the book. And Martin, feel free to jump in at any point here, because he has had concerns since the beginning of our course about the extent to which it may be flipping and where it's heating up. Would you like to join in? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah. But we could put you on the mic if you're very soft-spoken.
I think he's loud enough.
No, you've had a good question, Martin, all along. Do you recall?
No.
You don't. No worries. We can come back.
Okay, thank you.
But during the Transmediale, there was a lot of discussion about the service, do you say that? Of media. One is like, you say, a little like Wilhelm Lewis was saying, I'm communist, I'm monarchist, I'm anarchist. Like we get so many information that we are everything. This week we are into this, next week, new trends. And there is so much information, and there's also this tendency, creating data, big data, and we're into the uberveillance, the paranoid of everything I'm producing is being used by someone else to know about me and control me or whatever. Maybe one of the disservices of being in this global media where we are so exposed and there is no more privacy. And
this touches 2 interesting points. One connects perhaps to your question. I would go for the radical thesis that the individual identity turns out as an illusion. McLuhan talks about it in Flusser II, that this is just an illusion that comes with literacy, that everything can be seen as one fragment and then analyzed and then understood. But now we come to the point that we see, okay, but when you really try to understand one thing, then you have to see all the relations and interdependencies. So, referring to this, maybe you take this as a thesis, individualism or individual identity may be an illusion. So that you are a capsule or a core identity, that you have something like very strong borders. If you understand it more open or porous, as McLuhan uses the word, then his thesis comes into that we merge with other group identities. So that touches the point this woman just talked about. Yeah, you would jump in?
I'm not exactly 100% sure what I'm supposed to say, but I do remember an idea about something that I was concerned about.
Yeah.
And that was that I just feel like as we're moving into a more globalized world, and we have this global tribe, right? that there'd be like an oversaturation of similar ideas, so that maybe it'll be more and more difficult. Where McLuhan came from more of a literary time, and so there's a merging of these ideas, and so he was fearful that we're gonna lose those very unique, different ideas. So now when we're trying to innovate and stuff, we've kind of come to the cusp, you know, like I don't even know what he's saying.
Tipping point.
A tipping point, basically, yeah. So each time we innovate, it's not as good. We're not as effective at doing it. So I'm just curious as to when we start branching out. And now that you're right, some people are kind of disengaging from participating. You know, like we're all always plugged in. We can't get away from the technology, but some people are using technology in a different way. And until we get back into that reverted stage where we start dispersing once again, only then can we combine again, right? So it's kind of like cycles, and it just seems that when I'm thinking about McLuhan, that's just how he views the world, and he may be right with that, and that's just how we're always going to be thinking of it as. So, you know, in 30 years' time, we'll have a totally different conversation about, you know, the de-globalization of the world, perhaps, or something, right? But it'll be just in a different sense, because we can't predict. We don't know what it's going to be like, but it'll be different.
So I was with Martin when he made this point originally, and it's a great point. And something else that you touched on that you didn't bring up now was you spoke about, basically what you were alluding to was that the more individualistic a society is, the more competition there is, and thus the more innovation that there will be. So when everyone is more similar to one another and individualism is reduced, then there's less innovation, less competition. So I just wanted to echo that again, because I noticed that you did make a good point the other day, and I think that's kind of what you were getting at. Is that correct?
No, I'm a clever guy.
Yeah. So just to play off that, there's that whole idea of sameness. I mean, it resonates, I think, in McLuhan talking about the electric, you know, in his time, you know, that culture is based on the one-liner. You know, the simplistic jokes, the very cool jokes, but also the pithy advertising slogans and the extent to which people, but particular advertisers, but just everyday people, seem to not have much time for anything else. In a rather cool anticipation of Twitter, for example, as literally, you know, the one-liner, the 140-character one-liner. And to Martin's point is that what happens? What's the message of that? Well, there could be a kind of a crushing sameness that descends over, and that's what McLuhan actually meant by mass man in part. When he talks about we've become mass man, pardon the gender violation, mass humanity, he meant in a sense of immediacy, that circuitry and being plugged in refers to, but you can't help but get an echo of Marcuse in that phrase, right? There's absolutely no question that he's concerned about a kind of a crushing sameness, the inability of a kind of totalitarianism on human imagination. Maybe I'm overstating that, but along those lines.
Well, of course, I mean, the mass identity connects to totalitarian concepts, that this is the ground. I mean, Hannah Arendt analyzed this very interestingly, that this is the ground for people to lean back and don't trust their own senses, their own judgment, and of course this connects to the faculty of the judgment in an electronic age of instantaneous information, where you can't detach anymore. And this is when McLuhan, I mean, this connects being a mass man and being unable to establish a critical point of view, to kind of detach and then think and then speak. So you always have to react instantaneously, but then you can't be that critical, perhaps.
No
And
place to
we-
hide, as it says. And I think that comes back down to identity too. Where do we find the time to be reflective? And the paradox we talked about the other day is that particularly really younger people, paradoxically find refuge or find privacy in the technology itself. You know, it's the people with earbutted up and on their devices with 200 other people on the subway and being there physically, but not really there at all, not participating in any way, and really shutting everything out by going into their digital bubbles.
Just from, I mean, I will bring in another Canadian academic here, Andrew Feenberg from Simon Fraser, who was our McLuhan keynote lecturer at Times Mediala a couple of years. Just on the note on the idea of competition and innovation, Feenberg has these 10 paradoxes of technology, and the fourth paradox I think is the paradox of the frame, where he says, like, in essence, efficiency does not success does not prove efficiency. Efficiency proves success, which in essence means that the reason things like Google or Uber or whatever new technologies emerge become prevalent is not because they were better in some way when they started out. There was a lot of, at every technological turn, there's a lot of technological manifestations which are made possible. But certain ones become prevalent not because they're better in any way, they just were the ones that better attracted investment. And the reason they attracted investment is because investors could turn a bigger profit. So there's certainly economic, systemic reasons why certain technologies become prominent and distributed around the world and certain other ones do not. That's like the case with, like, if you try to find an alternative to Facebook like Diaspora or something, and why those things never catch on. It's not because they have bad ideas. They're actually very smart people working on those projects. But they cannot, because like Diaspora has a host it yourself model where nobody's like looking into your own, you can own your own data, nobody's selling you ads by analyzing your data. So no investors want to invest in that. So they don't get the required investment, so Diaspora does not become a prominent model. Instead, Facebook is the prominent model. So the idea of innovation is that, yeah, sure, you got competition and innovation, but still, it doesn't mean that the best, most innovative product really succeeds.
And if you read another contemporary critic, Andrew Keen, the so-called antichrist of Silicon Valley, his recent book, The Internet is Not the Answer, that's the title of the book, in which he talks about a kind of new kind of hegemony, a new kind of that very thing where you really have people who have positioned themselves as the enlightened, you know, the digerati, the leaders and the owners of Google and Amazon and eBay and all these virtual online companies, whatnot, as being enlighteners and creating wonderful, liberating products. But the subtext, or what's really going on there, is massive concentration of ownership. And it kind of goes back to my original comment, my worry about digital convergence. Because when all media now share a common digital format, it becomes easy for a small group of players to own more and more of media production. And if you read King, that's a real problem.
Worries over the NSA spying on everybody, right? Because you're all producing data, digital data, which is kind of uniform, which is a lot easier for some organization like the NSA to compile than it would have been 30 years ago when data came in various media forms.
Do you think that McLuhan, that's what McLuhan was worried about? Or did he ever worry about that when he said, you know, we are the content? In the electric age, there, you know, information is the environment and we are the content. Was he concerned about that?
I think he was concerned about this corporate group belonging. I mean, and the maybe connected with it the numbness or not awareness of it, of supporting private economic interests. So
Chomsky, manufactured consent, the whole thing.
Yeah. So I mean,
maybe
this we are the content connects to the data.
Dallas Smythe.
Pardon?
Dallas Smythe. Early influencer of McLuhan, like early Of advertising TV.
Oh.
Yeah. You were the you were the product of TV.
But McLuhan worked a lot with the advertising agencies,
Yes.
right? So he was very much aware of targeting, and so I think his sentence really meant exactly what's happening now. It's really true.
Was he right to help advertisers try to understand audience behavior?
It was happening anyway.
No moral judgment.
That's convenient, not
Yeah,
having to take
yeah.
a perspective.
Yeah,
It's one thing you could, be critical, and people have been, of course, of McLuhan for not taking a perspective. But why doesn't he? Because he says it would just add to the smog of culture. There's too many opinions, too many simple perspectives out there. And in the CBC clip that Andrea showed yesterday, he's asked, well, what does Marshall McLuhan need to do to be taken more seriously? And he says Marshall McLuhan is already taken way too seriously.
And he gets much
Applause. So he's validated in not taking a position, and I think we talked about Norman Mailer before as challenging him, and there may be something to that.
I don't know if it's a point of discussion. You mentioned about Republica, and I was watching those videos, and I can't remember who talked about how data is actually human activity. And then when people talk about big data, it's basically the measurement of human activity, and we're turning it to I guess it's basically that idea of being a transaction value. And he goes back to about slavery. Slavery is an exchange of value, like human. So it's almost like we are going back to that slavery stage where we become a slave and exchange of value. It's just turning it in different names. It's data because it's digital versus human physical body.
Slaves that's a provocative way to put it. He talks about us as being sleepwalkers, being somnambulists that were numbed in almost numbed to unconsciousness about how the media is affecting us. Slavery has a stronger connotation. I'm not sure. I mean, I like the idea and the provocativeness of it.
It was Earl Balkan's talk, I think. The guy who
Yeah, I think so. I just went through a whole bunch of them. Like,
But would McLuhan go there? But I wonder.
Well, I mean, tribality has traditionally included slavery as one of the
Byproducts anyway.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting because what can break it, right? If it really happens, what are ways to escape? And I think, again, also going to Republica, what I found fascinating is when you hear hackers talk there, they have this very, and it comes back to a point you made much earlier, they have this very strong discourse of gaming and of jokes and of pranks and of, it's really, not being serious, right? And I think that's really fascinating. That becomes the resistance, the form of resistance, right? To game it, to...
Well, I would like to comment on that. There was a law in Spain in April. They prohibited demonstrations. And there was a hologram demonstration in Madrid. So in a way, it's like this cheap body. I mean, even if this physical body is enslaved, we have this other cheap body to fight in the hour.
It's reassuring.
No, but also in the Transmediale there was a talk from the guy from Pirate Bay, Peter Sunde, and he was saying that he gave up, that he was not going to fight the system, that there is no way out. And I haven't read a lot about McLuhan's humanism, but I think he did wanted to expand a little on this Catholic humanism, or
in the laws of media, he says that all human media and technology, fall within the realm of humanity and need to remain studied in terms of the senses, in terms of how we are bodily engaged with media such that they impact us and reshape it in turn. So, I mean, he was very much a humanist from the sense of not losing sight of our humanity in this, in technology. And I think that's one of the challenges. And I think that's behind his fear that if we get too lulled and we become too somnambulistic, we sleepwalk too much on these issues, that it will be, in his word, a disaster.
So that's what we try to.
To do an event.
With this format, we, for example, try to not sleepwalk, not being numbed by the media, but on the other hand, try to get aware of the conditions of the interrelations, and that, well, for me personally, making us aware that we are, the state is us. We can change it. I mean, of course, there is a system and we can't get out. There's no way of detaching. I would, follow McLuhan in that. But still, it's on us, I would say. So we try to finish the whole event with some kind of positive.
On a high note.
There is still space for final comments. So maybe we, for McLuhan, this will be the final say. And we try
do a last round and
yes,
last
and then we
of
do a last round.
comments,
Yeah.
and then we'll disperse.
Go to our digital
so this comes
bubble.
back to being with it.
Well, we have less intelligent people. For example, this being with it, for example, is very characteristic of dialogue. In dialogue with somebody else, you are not maintaining a fixed point of view. You are interchanging, you are interpenetrating, modifying the point of view of each is modified by the dialogue itself. You do not hold a fixed point of view, which you do in an article in a magazine or a book. You see, this is natural. You set up.
You are saying that when I'm watching a television show, and I'm speaking of an entertainment television show, that I'm in some way engaged in it, and that I'm with it, and am I engaging in a dialogue with whatever's going on in front of me?
The character of the television image, I think it fosters this kind of participation simply because it is a rather poor image, and it involves the viewer in a great deal of completion of the detail that is missing visually in that image. The act of seeing television is very much that participation, as in reading a detective story where you were very much with it, precisely because you were not given a very much narrative information. You have to fill it in.
The last words are, you have to fill it in.
Yeah, just complete the image.
Yes. So, final comments?
Well, it was just on your last point. I'm sorry to speak beyond the clip here, but although I could talk to the clip as well. Particularly, The Simpsons for me, the television show is a paradigm of McLuhanism, where there's so much self-reference and so much playfulness with pop culture and its own mystique. And it's interesting that the cartoon that they often show, this Itchy and Scratchy, is a very poor quality old film. Like it's a parody of that idea. But to your last point, one of the main takeaways from McLuhan that I think I've been able to mobilize, certainly in what I do as a teacher, but also just as a father and hopefully a contributing member of society, is to kind of shift that concept away from the fixed position and the linear, sequential idea that you talked about earlier, that, and I think you were anticipating in talking about McLuhan's idea of shifting from having jobs and specific, a concrete idea of what you want to be, and it relates to this whole idea that tribal societies are more with it in a very physically embodied way. And one of the criticisms, one of the comments, that McLuhan makes about young people in his day, which would have been me, as a TV generation, was that we lack goals and objectives. And it wasn't necessarily a criticism, it's simply a comment that that's a feature of tribal life. And part of that, what that means, I think, at the end of the day for us today, is that we need to do that. We need to think about, what we do, what our role is, and that should really be plural. That today we will have multiple roles, and already do, in fact. And certainly I have really shifted a lot of my, I was going to say pedagogy, but I don't teach children, but really the adults, the university, and the andragogy, in other words, the philosophy of teaching today. I make a very concerted effort to rejig my courses so that what happens in the classroom is more about students learning what roles they might play in society as opposed to, you know, what job am I preparing them for.
And do you think McLuhan had, because he was a professor, also a type of pedagogic program or idea?
Did he live that?
Yeah.
Did he live that philosophy? I think very much so. The way he conducted his seminars and his close groups, his study groups, were very much, he had a high engagement with his students, and would be, I think, there as a resource for deep knowledge, but was really there to help encourage students to do their own probing and their own experimenting.
It's interesting that you make this point that you feel that your teaching is shifting or has been shifting recently, and I think so too, really. I'm connecting to technology for 2 semesters now. I don't allow laptops in my classroom any longer, and cell phones and whatever else you might bring into my classroom. And it's strange because I'm a media professor, right? I was not opposed to it from the get-go. I was just fine with it for a long time. And then I followed, there's a new trend, and you probably also got it already in your emails at some point. If you're a professor somewhere, you got it. An argument being made that maybe that's not a good idea. We have to create like sacred spaces, quiet spaces for reflection. And it used to be easier, but it's not that easy any longer. And so maybe that's the new role of universities, to kind of, to provide this safe space to think.
Bastion of linearity.
That's right.
Pacific,
Next.
My final comment. Well, I assume I already did it when I said you have to fill it in. I'm really, it's kind of dramatic, but as you said, satire and humor is the new way. So I'm exaggerating, but I think this is this is the most touching point for me in McLuhan. This being aware and trying to understand the conditions, and then with this trying to understand that we can fill it in.
And I'll just talking about the world of roles going into the world of jobs in modernism, right? First we had the world of roles, and then from jobs now we're retrieving certain role-like features in society. Gutenberg Galaxy, that's where that all gets elaborated very well. I mean, it has a lot of Shakespeare. Shakespeare appeared at the time of the printing press and elaborated this transition from a world of roles into a world of jobs. And that disruption that happened in the society is very well represented in this book. I didn't like it at the beginning because I didn't like Shakespeare very much. But if you can get through that, you might enjoy Shakespeare in a new way.
Can I add something? Because this role-playing is not only very well described in that, but too, in one clip we had prepared for today, but which might be interesting for you. This is a lecture he gave in 1974 in Florida University. We don't have to play the clip, but if you're interested,
so you can see what it looks like. It's yellow.
And it's online. You can see it on YouTube.
The lecture is online.
Now, Africa Women's Lib. The elect.
So there is a lot of
this
role playing, and later on, for example, he calls the global village the global theater, connecting to this role playing and being aware of role playing. So it's not the actor who forgets himself totally. It's the feedback of your image in the audience.
But that is Shakespeare.
Yeah.
The world is staged.
Yeah. So
The global theater, then the global village. The globe. It was Shakespeare's.
Yes.
With that, I'd like to thank our guests. I guess we're going to hang around, and we're happy to discuss independently or in smaller groups. And thank you, Embassy of Canada, for hosting this. And
we would just like to butt in for a second. It's our time to say thank you to the panelists and our guests for putting this event together. And we have some gifts which are coming around the corner from the embassy for each of you.
I guess we did well.
I know.
It's like, because they
That's
give
the gold
us
star. We don't always
Thanks for your participation.
We're involved.
Totally.
there you are.
It's an iPad.
That's our corporate design.
Variety, there you are.
Thank you.
Not only message, but also a massage.
Yes.
Because at the end, you believe all.
Yeah, you can feel it.